Hello, and welcome to another episode of Law Unfiltered. I'm your host, Jonathan Mason, and we have our legal analyst, Sonya Madison.
Hi, Jonathan.
How are you today?
I'm good.
Good. Sonya, just a couple of weeks ago or so, we were talking about the incident in Cincinnati at the Cincinnati Zoo with the gorilla, and then unfortunately we have an even more tragic situation now with the alligator at the resort at Disneyland who came out of the water and attacked a child, and unfortunately the child didn't survive that attack. And first of all, it's just the most gut-wrenching, tragedy and nightmare for a parent. I just can't imagine, a parent living through that. Not only having that happen to your child, but being there by the water with your child, and then actually trying to save your child from it. It's just the stuff that nightmares are made of. But then the attorney, the legal analyst in each of us probably starts thinking about, well, how does this happen, and who's responsible for this, or is anyone responsible for it? Is it just one of those unfortunate freak things with nature, and we have no control over? And animals, they didn't put the alligators in this lagoon. So that's sort of like, to me, one of the first, overriding issues is, and let's go back before I get into that, a little bit of the facts, and I don't know them, in a lot of detail, but just from what I've read, the child was out on the edge of the water, or perhaps a foot or two into the water. My understanding is that there was a sign that said no swimming, but there was not a warning sign for alligators, unlike some other resorts in the area. And then, a lot of people have said that, well, the no swimming sign should tell you to stay out of the water. And I guess that's my...
Tell a 2-year-old, right, to stay out of the water.
Or to tell a child not to let their 2-year-old get in the water. You're right, an adult. I'm sorry, I think I said a child. I misspoke. But right, a parent would see that and say, okay, I can't let that kid get in the water. But my first question is that one and the same? Is a sign that says no swimming, is that sufficient to warn you not to get in the water? Or if you do, an alligator might attack you and kill you. I mean, what do you think about that?
No, I don't think it's sufficient to know that an alligator is going to attack you and kill you. I think that's just sufficient to know you don't go far into the water. And what this child was doing, or what a parent probably watching his child doing, is just putting their feet on the tip of the water, not actually going in, not anticipating drowning, which would be, to me, the reason why you would put a no swimming, so you don't go put yourself in a position where someone's going to have to save you, or you're going to be stuck drowning, but not in a position where you're going to be attacked by an alligator. I mean, there are a lot of other places in the world where there are no alligators, but yet the no swimming sign still means do not swim, because we don't have a lifeguard on duty, and you'll go far enough in the water that you're just going to potentially drown.
Right, and I mean, I also, maybe it's a reflection of places I've lived, but when I think of a no swimming sign, I think of it is because the water might be contaminated, there could be sewage in the water, or it's just unhealthy to get in the water and to ingest that water or be exposed to what might be in that water.
But the key thing is the water. It's not any living creatures in the water. It is the water itself that is going to be a potential problem for you.
And they could have thought that. I mean, these people were not Floridians. They were from Nebraska. So I'm doubting that they have much contact with alligators in Nebraska. And so one of my thoughts was, would it make a difference? People in Florida tend to be very aware of alligators. I've seen a lot of interviews. People are, they know what the busiest times of the day are for alligators. And this attack happened at one of those times, around like 9 p.m. in the evening, around that time. They're very aware of the habits and the dangers of alligators. And alligators get everywhere. They get in pools, pretty much any body of water, no matter how big or small, is a potential home for an alligator. So does it matter that, maybe these people who are from out of state should have gotten a more of are they entitled to more of a warning, or is it such thing like these attacks are so rare that Disney maybe they took steps to prevent this from happening by getting alligators out of the lagoon when they found out that they were in there, relocating them or what have you. So, I mean, what's your view on that?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to know the claim that the parents or someone would have against Disney to better understand whether or not that would be sufficient or whether there is some liability on Disney's part. Now, for me, if the parents were to decide we want to sue Disney because of what happened, it would have to be under a negligence theory, which essentially is saying you've breached the duty, and that's what you're talking about here. There's this duty to maintain a public or a safe environment. That doesn't say with the exceptions of Floridians or with the exception of in-state or particularly out-of-state or anything like that. It's public in general, particularly an international amusement park. That is, when you're talking about putting up signs, you're not saying, well, these signs are for the benefit of out-of-state people in the state should know better. You're saying these signs are for the benefit of all of our patrons, all of the public that is going to come here and enjoy whatever we have to offer. And so in that sense, if I was that parent, I would, and if I lived in Florida, I mean, this parent didn't, but if I lived in Florida, I would still make the argument that you have a breach to all, you breach your duty to all patrons here, not just me, but all, by not sufficiently putting a sign that warns us of the potential for alligators. Now, whether or not an alligator attack is rare or not, it's still important to know that there are alligators in this water. And if I'm going to have my kid just kick a little bit, I need to be on guard, on watch for what could potentially happen.
Yeah, I'm trying to think back to like a failure to warn claim, for example. And I guess part of that claim is whether the threat is open or whether it's something that the landowner has a better knowledge of than the visitor, for example. So, first of all, I can't imagine that Disney would fight this claim if a claim were brought.
I can't either.
In fact, they're probably reaching out to that family now to try to resolve this without it even, having to go to any kind of legal steps. I mean, at least that's what I would be trying to do, because it's just, even if they did everything by the book, they took all the precautions that they could possibly take. It's just still, it happened. It happened on their property. I'm not saying they should be strictly liable, or maybe I am. I'm not sure. I have to think about that.
You're saying they should try to mitigate their damage.
They should try to mitigate, because legally it's one thing, but public relations wise, and they're a resort company, they're an amusement company. They can't have it so that people are afraid to come there, which they may not be able to do. And there are probably people, if they're not afraid to come there, they're going to be maybe afraid to go near the water in these lagoons on these resorts or anywhere else in Florida. So it just seems like they've got a lot at stake here, and it's not a situation where even if you could come up with a legal argument that might be successful, it just doesn't seem. Sometimes, do you agree that there are times when, even if you have the upper hand on law, it doesn't make sense to.
Well, there's a business reason and then there's the legal reason. Now, for business-wise, and what you're talking about, public relations, talking about future income, future profits, business-wise, you should just go ahead and, like you said, mitigate the damage, try to settle. But if you're going to do it for a legal reason, then that's a whole separate issue. And that's what I do, and I'm sure you do when we're advising our clients is, okay, I'm going to tell you what the law is, and I'm going to tell you exactly what your rights are. But you have to make the business decision when it comes to whether or not this is important for you to stand on a principle, or whether it's more important for you to continue to grow, your profits or whatever loss you may sustain if you go against or go for your principle. Right. So I think that's what you're talking about. I mean, definitely Disney would try to hold that defense that you're saying, well, what's this foreseeable? There's been 40 or so, or not even 40, I think 20 or so attacks by alligators since 1973, I want to say. And so whether it's foreseeable or not, it could be debatable. But again, if you sit in a courtroom and you've got a jury and they're watching this child get attacked, I don't think anyone is going to quiver on that jury about whether or not being that one out of a million is really a big issue here.
Right. One thing that happened with this, from my point of view, is that when they were talking about a kid, getting attacked by this alligator, and you think, oh, it's horrible and it's tragic, but once they identify the family and the child, and then they show the picture of the child, like everything in your mind just changes. It totally humanizes it, and like you said, you wouldn't want that to be presented to a jury,
right?
Like, this picture of the child. And I'd heard that it didn't have footage of the attack, but if they did, nobody would really want to see that unless they absolutely had to. But that's just not something that you'd want.
To have that parent take the stand and have to talk about watching their child get dragged by this alligator. Any parent on that jury would feel for that person. And you don't want to tell that parent, well, sorry, you were just unlucky that day. Now, you want that resort, Disney, to take some accountability for what happened. And the fact that when they went back and did a search of the water, they found 2 or 3 other alligators. Clearly what you're doing to try to prevent alligators from getting in this water may not be sufficient. Perhaps we need to start cleaning it a little bit more than however often you're doing it now.
Right. Or maybe maybe they get to the point where they don't have these lakes and lagoons on the properties at all.
Or put a sign, hey, alligators here. Like we said with the gorilla, maybe you need to put better barriers to prevent them from even getting anywhere near the water. I can't even imagine being near any type of water that has something like a swamp figure. When I think of alligators, I don't think of them being on nice freshwater beaches. I think of them being in swamps, in nasty water that I wouldn't want to be anywhere near. So I'm thinking perhaps you need to put a barrier or something, if you're not, like you said, going to make sure the alligators are not going to be in there.
Yeah, and I also understood that there was a lifeguard who was there on the beach as well. So,
which is interesting since there's a no swimming sign, right?
Which is very interesting. That's a good point. But what was I wonder what they were on, and I haven't investigated it, but like you said, and why are they there if it's not supposed to be swimming? And it is part of his responsibility or her responsibility to warn people not to get in the water. Maybe that's what he's there for. And if so, why didn't he tell this kid to get away? Parents to get the child away from the water. But clearly, they're going to make changes. They've already shut down all the lagoons or the beach areas around the lagoons.
Which that's just a temporary to make sure they got all the alligators.
It could be, but the problem is they can't stop. They can't stop these alligators from coming back. They can take them out.
And if they come to that conclusion, then they've got to put up a sign. There's got to be something.
Well, I think a sign at this point is, it's a given, and sort of, and it's. Legally, it seems like that. There's a term for that, remedial measures or something. I don't know. Remember the exact term from law school. It's been a long time, but if you didn't have signs up and now this incident happens and now you put up signs, is that an indication that you should have had signs up all along? Because you could say, regardless of whether there's been an attack, if there are alligators in there, there's a threat. And why is there a reason not to have signs up other than you want people to congregate around that area and not be afraid?
Or safe, and that then goes against your argument that it was a safe environment, right?
Right. So it'll be interesting to see. We may not ever know. It'll probably get resolved and everything will have to be
but we will
confidential.
Know if they took remedial measures, like you said, subsequently to this.
Like I said, I can't. They probably already have signs of the signs are being made, as we speak. Because an area like this, it seems like there's so many things that could go wrong. Aside from animals, this is just a bizarre incident, rare. Hopefully, it will never happen again. But in a place like that, there's just so many places for liabilities with rides and amusements and all sorts of things that can happen
be
when you run an
concerned.
environment like that.
Anytime I have to regularly pull out alligators from a pond, I'm gonna just be concerned in general about the liability of safety and what could happen.
Well, yeah, in a place, any landowner in Florida, I would agree with that. But in a place where you cater to families, you know, your whole thing is attracting children and families, and to have a good time, you know, in this, you know, kind of make-believe world, then yeah, you want to make sure there are no alligators
Yes.
or any other animal threats. You want to minimize it. Again, I don't think you can do everything to make sure it's 100% safe, but
what you don't do, if you can't do everything, then you have to at least forewarn people.
Exactly. And, you know, we don't know everything now. I mean, we don't know, for example, in the rooms, did they have materials that talked about, you know, the threat of alligators around the community, around the water? I mean, we don't have that type of information.
I don't know if that would make a difference, but you're right, we don't know. But I'd imagine it still wouldn't make a difference in the situation.
Well, I think it would if it was actually, like, if, you know how you have the information in your room about where to eat and the activities around the resort or whatever, or the TV has information running about what to do around the resort. And I'm not saying there were, but I think, you know, if there were more, like if they had a video about, you know, alligators on the property, or be aware of alligators in Florida in general, things like that. I mean, maybe.
To me, I don't know if I would hold on to that if I was Disney. I would still, just like other properties were doing, I think that's the reason why other properties were doing it, because they know, listen, yeah, we can tell people all day long, but until you are right in the midst of what you're about to do, let me put up the sign and remind you, hey, before you start jumping in this water, make sure you're aware.
And I think
alligators are here.
And I think, which helps your argument too, is that, or your point, is that a sign is visual. They have a picture of an alligator. If you have materials in your room or whatever, everybody might not even be able to speak English or read English. So, but if you see a picture on a sign, you know, of an alligator, that's universal. I think anybody can understand that. So, it's tragic. And,
it is. And a lot of people have been getting on the parents as well. I know you don't like that, but a lot of people are saying what the parents should have deterred that child from going in there. But I do still think it's going to be Disney World that really.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, those parents, I mean, they're paying a huge price. Yeah. And we weren't there. We don't know. You know, those people who were saying that they weren't there. They didn't see what happened. They don't know how long that child was, how far they were away from the parent, how quickly the alligator came. You know, we don't know. We weren't there. So.
Well, it's similar to the gorilla incident, where that one was probably a little bit more easier for people to blame the parent, whereas this one, I mean, there's still no pattern, or at least we don't know the pattern of abuse or, you know, neglect or any type of situation like that. So to blame someone on one instance is really not, you know, what the law permits when it comes to parenting. So.
Yeah. It's sad, it's unfortunate, and I hope that measures are taken to keep this from happening again. And that's the main thing. I mean, it's horrible that this child's life was cut short at 2 years old, but if we could prevent this from happening again, then hopefully this child's death won't be in vain, I guess as well.
Well, hopefully we don't have to talk about such tragic things later. I mean, I hope it doesn't come up soon, because I'm surprised this came up so quickly after the gorilla. So let's hope a lot of other businesses take these stories and make sure that they put whatever safety measures.
And all of this was in Orlando. It's so strange that it all happened. A lot of journalists were there to cover the mass shooting at the nightclub, and then this happens right on the heels of it. It's just a horrible time for that city, but that's what we're here for, to analyze these issues and talk about them and, you know, educate you, our viewers. We appreciate your time in watching this episode of Law Unfiltered, and we'll see you next time.